Meridian 9 was a thin speck on the map of human space. It hung at the edge of a small trade lane, where supply runs came rarely and the sky felt wider than any single crew could fill. The station was not grand. It had patched panels, a tired hydroponics bay, and a diner where people swapped small lies to keep their spirits even. Routine kept Meridian steady. Routine made the dark easier. Myra worked the listening array. She liked the hum of machines that never slept. It soothed her. Each day she scanned the steady noise of stars and satellites, the old radio hiss that lived between beacons. Mostly, nothing changed. Mostly, everything stayed the same. On a night that should have been ordinary, the array registered a tiny click. Myra frowned and tuned the feed. It was faint, a soft tap under the usual hiss. She thought at first it was a loose wire. She played the recording once, then again. The taps came in a small pattern, 1, 3, 7, 11. She nodded at the screen and told herself she was imagining meaning in random noise. Still, she marked the time and saved the file. The pattern did not feel random when she listened to it more closely. It had a rhythm like someone counting with care. It felt deliberate. She played the clip for Mikkel, the chief technician. He frowned and rubbed his eyes. "Old equipment," he said. "Cosmic rays, temp spikes. Archive it." He wrote the command and tried to laugh, but Myra saw the line of worry at his mouth. The office lights hummed. Outside the porthole, stars drifted like nothing at all. Myra could not sleep. She sat with the file on a loop and watched the numbers on her console. The taps were steady. When she shifted the playback speed, another layer appeared beneath the rhythm. It was an echo but not the kind machines made. It answered after a pause as if listening before replying. The pause was not random either. Myra felt a small, cold thought, something was hearing them back. She sent a secure packet to command, a simple request to check noise logs. The reply was quick and bland. Likely interference. No action. Command did not want to tie up assets for a possible glitch. Myra read the message twice. It was a polite dismissal. It sounded like the sort of voice that pulled covers over a problem and called it safe. The pulse came again the next night, this time picked up faintly on an old navigational buoy near the lane. A whisper of the same count appeared on a survey ship 2 days out. Word threaded through the net slowly, then faster. Meridian's saved file spread to inboxes and then to voices that liked to shout. People online argued. Some said it was a hoax. Others suggested a rare natural phenomenon. A few went quiet and stared at star maps. Myra noticed that more hands reached for the file once it left command. Someone in the freight yards joked that the stars were finally trying to talk to them. Myra did not laugh. She pulled out a faded chart from the station's archives. A retired cartographer's notes hung there, brittle and careful. When she overlaid the tiny shifts in timing from the different stations, the pattern made faint lines that matched old star markers. The taps were not only counting, they were pointing. Each time the rhythm arrived at a station, it shifted the smallest fraction. When she traced those shifts across the map, a path appeared. The path led toward places the fleet had named long ago and then left to sleep. Myra tried to explain the map to Mikkel. He listened with one ear, half interested and tired in the other. "You're reading too much into random noise," he said again. He wanted to believe that his job was wires and fans and sensors. He wanted to believe that danger was not in the hum. A flare bloomed on the horizon that night. It was small and silver, a thin brush of light that lasted less than a breath. The station's cameras caught it and then lost it. No ship registered on the trackers. No signal matched the glow. The pulse stopped at the same time the flare faded. When the feed went silent, the station felt heavier. People walked a little closer to each other. The diner had more empty chairs. Someone in hydroponics muttered a prayer she did not know the words to. Myra sat with the recording and played it until the dawn made the room look honest and small. Command finally sent a message asking for more data. Their interest made everyone nervous. Questions arrived with official tones: who heard it, where, what did the clip show? The station provided the files and waited for orders. Waiting was its own kind of pressure. It pressed at every decision until people made smaller, quicker choices. Myra kept replaying the echo. Each play felt like listening for a breath under a door. She could not tell if the thing that answered wanted to be feared or to be known. She only knew that someone had pushed a sound into the wide dark and expected a reply. She also knew that silence could be dangerous in the same way sound could be. On the third day, a minor alarm tripped in the comms bay. It was only a single, low beep that told them the array had detected a small energy spike between frequencies. Mikkel checked the logs and wrote it off as a solar gust. He filed the report. He left the files open on Myra's console. Myra copied them. Then she stepped to the window and watched the stars slide by without notice. Meridian 9 had always been quiet. It had never been empty. On the contrary, the station had the quiet of a place where things waited. For the first time, that waiting felt like a listening. She tucked the recordings into a private slot and made a note in her log: if nothing else, the signal is careful. If nothing else, we have been seen. The words sat on the screen like a small, true thing. Outside, the dark went on. Inside, the monitors kept their patient glow. No one at Meridian slept well that night. They thought the sound had been a single mistake until it arrived again. This time it reached not just Meridian 9 but a worn navigational buoy in the belt and a survey cutter 2 days out from the frontier. The same pattern 1, 3, 7, 11 came with tiny shifts. Each place that heard it added a new small change, like a footstep on a long path. Word moved faster than anyone at Meridian expected. Files that Myra had saved slipped through feeds and found ears they were not meant for. People who worked at docks or in low cafes read the pattern and shrugged. Some laughed. Some made prayers. Some sat very still and watched the sky. An old cartographer named Sen came out of a retirement office when the pattern hit his town. His hands had the map bent shape from years of folding paper and holograms. He leaned over the recording and let his eyes wander. Where others heard counting, he heard pointing. The pattern's smallest timing shifts matched stars he had named when he was young and when names still meant routes. When he overlaid the pulses from 3 stations, faint lines traced themselves across space. They made a path to places no one had visited in a long time. It is a map, he told a small circle of listeners, his voice like dry paper. A map made of sound. Paper-thin excitement rippled through other circles. Traders saw routes and profit. Academics saw the chance of a lifetime. Religious groups spun meaning into prophecy. Command closed doors and met in rooms with heavy air. Some voices called for study. Others asked to hide the files and pretend nothing had happened. The debate reached a fever pitch in small places and in big halls. Faces on screens argued about safety and glory. A senator said the map could rewrite history. A captain said it could rewrite why ships left home. The risk was real, sending people into unknown space could bring back wonders or danger. Not everyone waited for permission. A captain named Jorah had been a smuggler when she was younger and still kept the old courage that money could not buy. She took a small, fast probe and fitted it with a cheap camera and a stubborn heart. She did not ask for approval. She trusted maps made of sound more than words made by suits. The probe slipped through lanes where the larger ships did not like to go. It hummed with a tight focus, find the place the pulses pointed to and report back whatever it saw. Jorah watched the live feed through jittery signals and the smell of coffee in her ship. Her hands trembled a little. She told herself the tremble was excitement. The first images came in grainy and thin. Shapes appeared that a human eye did not expect. Towers. Rings. The probe showed angles that bent starlight into lines that didn't belong to natural storms. There was an architecture in the dark that made the crew hold their breath. It looked like someone had built a memory out of stone and wire and had left it to sleep under dust. Then the feed flickered. Lines broke, then returned with a new frame. For a moment, the camera caught a surface that reflected light in a way no known alloy did. It shone cold and very old. A pattern of markings crossed it, thin as scratches and just as deliberate. The probe's sensors read frequencies that did not match anything in the database. Alerts flared in the probe's telemetry. Jorah cursed and told the machine to pull back. Before the probe could move, the camera blurred. Light bent and smeared the picture into a smear of silver. A new vibration went through the feed like a note struck in a room and heard in the next hall. The probe sent a single, broken packet, an image of a ring, impossibly thin, encircling a dark aperture. Then the transmission died. Broadcasts everywhere paused when the feed cut. People at Meridian saw the cut and felt a quiet like a hand closing. Theories multiplied to fill the silence. Some said the probe had triggered a defense system. Some said it had recorded the last honest thing before the place hid itself again. Jorah swore softly and called for more gear. Command asked questions, sharp and cold. Where did you go? What did you touch? Did the probe return any radiation? She sent what she had and waited for answers that did not come. In small forums, voices argued about the image. A technician in a port said the ring looked like a shipyard design from a dead colony. An old radio host played the single frame of the aperture until it became like a drum beat in the background of late-night talk. People began to say the word ruins in the same minutes they wrote salvage and prize. Sen the cartographer would not sleep. He traced the path again with a trembling hand and saw more. The tiny timing shifts in the pulse suggested not only points but old boundaries. Someone, long ago, had seeded a route with sound as a warning or as a signpost. He thought of people who had left worlds in anger and who might have buried their traces like bones in the ground. For some, the pulses were a key to lost worlds. For others, they were a trap. The planet-side networks filled with questions that had no answers. A small group of families on a fringe world packed their things silently and left. A marketplace stopped selling new voyage licenses. Myra watched the debate from Meridian and felt the edge between curiosity and fear press at her. The file she had kept slept in a chamber on the station, shared now with people who could read it better than she could. She thought of Jorah's probe and the single frame it had sent. The image had looked like a doorway. The doorway had looked like a mouth. When the feed settled into a cold dawn, Command sent a short order: increase listening, send small reconnaissance, and inform all stations to report anomalies. They used the language of caution, but the tone carried a different weight. Interest had become action. Outside Meridian 9, the stars kept turning. Inside, people chose sides one by one, some for discovery, some for safety, some for riches. The map in the pulses waited like a sleeping thing. No one could say whether waking it would bring answers or wake a new danger. The net hummed with questions, and in the deep, old places, something that had been quiet for a long time might have heard them all. News spread like a cracked bell. Where the pulse had once been a strange curiosity, it now split people into camps. Some wanted answers. Some wanted weapons. Some wanted silence. The argument moved from talk shows into streets and then into the halls of power. Flags changed hands. Old friends stopped answering messages. Meridian 9 watched the noise from the edge and felt the world tilt. Myra read the feeds and felt the same tightness in her chest she had felt the night of the flare. People outside Meridian shouted for exploration. Others shouted to cover their ears. In the middle stood Command, trying to keep order with slow, careful words that did not stop anyone from getting angrier. A ship arrived in a quiet harbor 3 jumps from Meridian. It did not fly the thin white banner of human diplomacy. Its hull was low and dark, and its docking voice was smooth and not loud. An envoy stepped down with a suit that fit like water. The press called it an ambassador. The crew called it an envoy. The envoy called itself Arod. Arod spoke softly and with a patience that sounded older than any calendar. It offered help. "We have tracked similar pulses," it said. "We can help you read them." Its language had an odd rhythm, and the translator put the rhythm into careful English. Aroda's people, it claimed, used sound like maps. They had seen the pattern before. They were not excited. They were tired. The message from Arod should have calmed things. Instead it poisoned them. Some leaders welcomed the help as a relief. Some leaders saw the offer as an offense. "Do they want to take our maps and leave us with silence?" a senator cried on a public channel. Crowds gathered at embassies. Someone threw a rock at a window. The rock had no message beyond anger. It broke the glass anyway. In the middle of the argument, a listening hub on a small moon exploded. It was not some slow failure. It sounded like a deliberate cut. The hub had been a soft place where scientists and families worked and slept. Now it was a scar of black glass and empty beds. The news feed showed flames and people running. Someone wept on live camera and a million faces watched. Accusations flew like knives. Fingers pointed at Aroda's people. Fingers pointed at rival nations. Fingers pointed at anyone who had access to the hub. Command said nothing at first except that they would investigate. Behind closed doors they mobilized small fleets. Old treaties that had rested like neat paper in drawers now felt fragile and thin. Myra watched the footage of the ruined hub until her eyes burned. The hub had been quiet when she last saw its logs. The last message from its system was a simple ping and then a line of noise like static. Someone in the feed muttered the words countdown before the camera cut to black. That word spread faster than the smoke. A small, secret team of human analysts worked in a room with no windows. They pulled raw recordings from stations and from intercepted channels. The team found a faint, alien voice in a file meant to be private. It said, in a foreign tonal pattern, words the translator gave as last pulse. The translation did not sound like threat or mercy. It sounded tired. It sounded older than the people who listened. The team traced the alien pattern to a hidden relay. It was brief and scrambled, but one fragment stood out. The fragment matched the exact timing of the pulses that had first reached meridian. The team felt the hairs on their arms rise. The pulses were not random beacons. They were deliberate markers, left by someone who had hoped others would find them. Meanwhile, small fleets did not wait for full answers. Fright and pride moved leaders to clear orders. Patrols tightened the lanes. Ships that once shared fuel and food now aimed their guns at strangers who passed too close. The galaxy felt smaller and harder. People who had never held a weapon learned the shape of fear. Jorah's reputation helped in these hours. She had sailed where others would not go and had brought back truth in a single broken image. Now she led a cover team given a single task: find out who blew up the hub and whether the pulses were a trap. Her crew moved faster than the big ships. They had fewer rules. They had more courage and terrible reasons to survive. On a ruined outpost, Jorah's team found shards of something that looked like a casing for a recording device. The metal had been scorched but not melted. A small recorder sat inside, its casing cracked but its memory mostly intact. The black box came to Jorah like a small, heavy truth. She had handled survivors and wreckage before. She knew that small boxes often told the largest lies. The analysts in the windowless room took the black box and opened the file. At first the data looked like noise. Then patterns surfaced. The pulses, they discovered, hid another rhythm beneath the count. Between the 1, 3, 7, 11, tiny clicks fit like teeth on a wheel. When the team layered the pulses from many stations, the clicks lined up. They repeated with a slow, patient timing across years of recordings. Someone began to read the pattern aloud, slowly. The clicks fell into a shape like numbers. When the group pressed the sequence into a time signature and translated it to human calendars, the pattern read out dates. The dates were not recent. They were old, older than a single generation but younger than legend. They formed a chain markers on a timeline. At the end of the chain, the team found a final set of clicks that did not match any past time. They matched a future slot. The clicks made a neat line that looked like a countdown, days, hours, pulses until a time yet to come. The room felt very small and very loud. Myra sat in Meridian's diner and watched the feeds, replaying the clip that the analysts had sent. The words countdown and last pulse echoed in her head like a bell. The stars outside her window did not look friendly. She thought of the flare, of the ring Jorah had filmed, of Aroda's tired patience. She thought of the hub in flames and the empty beds. People started to leave cities. Borders closed. Old alliances cracked. The debate that had once been words turned into action. Ships prepared for a day that pulsed in a pattern across the sky, a day that no one wanted to name and yet everyone feared. When the black box's file closed, one of the analysts whispered, "They were warning us." The word did not make anyone calmer. If the pulses were a warning, it meant someone had known enough to mark a timeline. It also meant someone else might be keeping time in the dark. Outside Meridian 9, night fell. The station's lights hummed. Inside, a dozen people made choices that would change everything. They could not know the right answer. They had only the sound of the pulses and the memory of an empty hub. The outcry had made the sky into something that listened back. And what listened was not yet finished. They found instructions where no one expected to find them. After the hub and the black box, the pulses were not only a map or a warning. A small team in a glass lab on a quiet moon discovered shapes inside the rhythm. Dr. Anika reran the signals through filters until patterns became lines. The lines looked like plans. They looked like blueprints for machines that could bend light and hide voices. The lab was not large. It smelled of coffee and solder and tired people. Anika kept the lights low so the screens did not glare. Her hands moved steady and slow over the data. Rafi, a young engineer with a laugh that still surprised him, fed the patterns into a fabricator. Pieces popped out in plastic and alloy, odd curves, and thin frames. When the pieces joined, they fit like a secret someone had already practiced. News of the plans leaked before anyone could plan what to do with them. Traitors whispered. Militias grew bolder. Some governments wanted control. Others wanted to destroy what they did not understand. Aroda's envoys asked to help. The word shield became common on feeds. So did the word weapon. People who had kept their hands clean began to think what a shield could do in a fight. Anika argued with her superiors. "We built it to protect people," she said. "Not to give power to those who would use it to hide crimes." Her voice was thin in the meeting room. Men with ties spoke of strategy. They did not look at the solder joints that held fragile hope. Rafi worked at night. He tightened bolts and tested circuits until his fingers ached. He told himself he built the device to keep children sleeping in forts and to keep whole towns from being found by things that hunted silence. When he ran the first power through the prototype, the lab hummed like a throat clearing. Lights folded. A camera's line bent as if a hand had dragged across glass. The first test was small. They used a single bulb and a lens. The light bent away from a detector. A radio under the dish stopped sending clear signals. On screen, an empty space appeared where an object should have been. It was not perfect. It shimmered at the edges like heat. It made the engineers laugh and curse and wipe their faces with the backs of their hands. It also scared them. Not everyone waited to see the safety reports. A private militia tried to seize the lab one night. They moved fast and loud, thinking force could take what secrecy could not. The lab's alarms screamed. Raffi pushed a manual lock and watched men pound the door. Anika grabbed a hard drive and shoved it in her coat. They ran to a maintenance hatch and spilled into a narrow corridor that smelled of coolant. The attackers found only an empty lab and a door that would not open. The world learned to want what it feared. Groups made offers to buy the plans. Brokers in shadow channels promised protection. A man named Voss, who had worked in procurement and owed more favors than he could remember, met with an alien middleman in a back alley of a trade port. He sold a copy of the blueprints in a thin voice and took credits that smelled of debt and shame. The alien broker smiled with too many teeth and promised to carry the file farther than any human could. When the leak came back, the lab felt exposed. Anika tightened protocols and burned old logs. She told her team they had to finish tests and present a version to a neutral council. But time moved faster than councils. The prototype was imperfect and hungry for power. It asked for testing under real conditions. Jorah heard about the prototype in the same way she had heard about ruins through a rumor that smelled like risk. She and Mikkel arranged a discreet watch. Jorah wanted to know if the device would hide convoys or hide criminals. Mikkel wanted to make sure it would protect stations like Meridian. They both knew power made people do brutal math. The lab scheduled a field test on a small cargo convoy scheduled to cross an empty lane. The prototype rode in a crate like a sleeping beast. Anika and Raffi argued about safety checks until the last minute. They sealed the crate and tied their hopes to sensor arrays and to prayer. When the device powered on, the world held its breath. For a second the convoy's scanners read empty space. Cameras showed only the curve of stars. Then the bend happened, light folded around the hull and the ship looked like a ghost. Transmissions went soft and then thin. The convoy's crew cheered, sure they were invisible. The lab watched numbers and watched a waveform that looked almost satisfied. On a screen far enough away to be safe, someone watched the test and did not cheer. The silhouette appeared in the outer edge of the test array. It was not a ship in any way the databases had names for. It was a shadow with texture, as if the dark itself had learned to shape a body. The silhouette watched the space where the convoy had been. It did not move like something hunting. It moved like something curious. Anika froze. Raffi sucked in a sharp breath. Mikkel swore on a quiet line. Jorah did not trust the shape. The prototype's field seemed to interest the silhouette. The shadow leaned into the folded light and read its edges like fingers reading braille. The field did not break. It held. The convoy reported no issue. Everyone aboard claimed the test a success. But the silhouette did not leave. It waited beyond the bend, patient and silent. It recorded how the light behaved and the way the device kept sound from leaving. It watched like a scholar or like a judge. The next day, files began to surface. The alien broker had not only bought the blueprint. He had copied test footage and sold it to watchers who had no right to know. A rumor spread that the silhouette had been drawn by the device. People who wanted power began to imagine using the tech to hide strikes, to smuggle armies, to erase offenses. Others imagined hiding families behind a shield and living in secret. Anika closed her hands until her knuckles hurt. She had wanted the device to keep people safe. Now she understood that safety and secrecy were different things. She thought of the hub that had burned and the faces she had seen in feeds. She thought of the silhouette and how it had watched without anger or mercy. It had only waited. The world moved toward more tests and louder promises. The sky, which once looked blank and simple, had become a place of choices. The device could change those choices. It could make some people invisible and others exposed. And somewhere in the dark, something that had been awake a very long time was writing notes about what they did next. When the lab finally powered down that night, workers went home with eyes that would not close easily. The prototype slept behind cables and locks. Outside, stars kept their slow rhythm. Inside, a single line of text glowed on Anika's console, "We are not alone." The words were not alarm and not comfort. They were a fact that would not leave them alone. They had counted days until the quiet broke. The pulses had been a warning, a map, and then a plan. Now they were a choice. When the countdown in the black box hit the final mark, the sky did not open with fire. It moved like a hush. At first, sailors and city watchmen felt only a small pull in the air, like a breath held too long. Then instruments began to fail in places that should have been simple. Lights went dim, radios went thin, and ships far from any fight lost the sound of their engines. People who had never heard danger knew it by the way the night went wrong. Command ordered fleets to posture and governments shouted for answers. Jorah's cover team moved ships to guard lanes. Anika and Raffi sat with the prototype and a pack of extra batteries. Myra watched feeds from Meridian 9 and read the log that had warned them all. Mikkel tightened bolts on old consoles. Sen the cartographer folded a paper map and kept it in his lap like a talisman. Arod stayed quiet in the doorway of a council room and did not try to hide that they had known fear before. The thing that came did not roar. It did not need to. It moved like a rule that took effect. It was hunger shaped into motion. Where it moved, sound cracked, and then stopped. Ships found themselves blind and deaf. Crews called out to one another and heard only the skin of silence. The predator had no teeth that showed. Its teeth were the quiet it made. At first, people panicked. Some ships cut engines and drifted. Others lit everything and signaled with bright, foolish flares. The predator slid toward the noise like a hand toward warmth. It did not chase light, it chased the space sound needed to live. It moved from lane to lane, testing, tasting. Where communities had been loud and proud, the hunter found a feast. Whole towns lost contact as it passed. The shield the lab had built did not stop everything. It could not crush the thing or break it. But it did something a gun could not, it taught. Anika and Raffi had wired the prototype not to hide a ship but to reflect the rules the pulses carried. That morning, the team made a painful choice. They would not use the device to vanish and run. They would fold light and sound into a mirror. Their plan was raw and simple. The prototype would make a field that did two things at once: it would hide the sounds of people inside, and it would return the silence the predator expected. In that mirror, the hunter would find itself with nothing new to eat. It would see itself measured back and be confused. Confusion could make a hunter move on. Jorah's convoy and a ring of volunteer ships formed a slow wheel. Anika activated the prototype while Myra fed the map timing into the array to replay the pulses with careful offsets. The team played the old pulse pattern back at the predator, but they did it folded through the shield. The return pulse was not a human sound. It was a copy of the ancient warning, layered and clean. It said, "Here is the silence you seek." It also said, in the way patterns sometimes do, "We have learned." For a long thin minute, nothing happened. Then the shadow that had watched the prototype before slid into place to test it. The hunter leaned into the field and found only itself. It tried to take sound and found the same hunger reflected. It expected surprise and found history. It expected new voices but heard only the old pulse, the kind that taught hiding not by fear, but by memory. In the stillness that followed, the hunter recoiled. It moved like something that had never been shown its own face. For a moment it hesitated beside a bright, folded convoy and then chose lanes away from human space. Where it left, sound returned slowly, like water filling a dry cup. Ships that had drifted found their engines again. People who had fallen silent began to speak and cry. But the victory was not clean. The experiment had cost lives. A small listening outpost had been burned in the hunter's path. Men and women on an old station had given their last broadcast so the signal could reach the shield. Anika and Raffi never stopped to count the cost. They had worked like people who had given a last gift. Jorah lost a pilot she had trusted. Myra watched the loss and felt her hands empty. After the hunter moved away, the galaxy did not celebrate like it had expected. There was no grand parade. There were small, private funerals and heavy hands in council chambers. People had learned that silence could be weapon and refuge. They had learned that power often arrived on two legs, the technology and the people who chose how to use it. The neutral council Arod had urged for weeks finally met. Nations and alien envoys sat together in a room that hummed with the memory of flame. The prototype was placed under joint custody. A set of rules was written down in language careful and slow: do not weaponize the shield, do not sell the plans, protect the quiet by law and habit. The rules were thin paper, but they had names and penalties. Sen insisted that copies of the original pulse be archived in museums and in places only trusted watchmen could reach. Humanity changed. Some leaders wanted to use silence as a trap. Others wanted to ban all research. In the end, the path they chose was not perfect. It was a promise. They would guard the quiet between stars and teach future generations how to listen before they spoke. They would remember the hub that burned and the families who fled. They would teach their children to keep signals small and to count pulses like names. Myra stood at Meridian's window months later and watched a faint flare pass without fear. She still replayed the original recording sometimes. Each time she listened, the pulse felt like a folded thing, a warning, a tool, a memory. The last line of her log read, simply, "We learned the cost of sound. We will keep the silence with care." Outside, the stars turned on, patient as always. Inside human space, people answered the dark with a new kind of listening. The last pulse had changed them not by making them louder or stronger, but by teaching them when to be quiet. That lesson would outlast machines and treaties. It would be the small, steady thing they carried into a sky that would not forget.